Look around! I got a lot! Oscar! It's a new lap record! It's a new lap record! Unity Takimalia!
Let's go!
It's a new lap record! It's a new lap record!
Oh! You ban la pihota, Mindia, huh? Ah, well...
It's a new lap record! record! It's a new lap 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 record! Lap record! It's a new lap record! It's a new lap record! record.
Fastest pod racer in the galaxy. Mahonic.
Open the gun!